everybody. I know this is yet another Amber Heard video. You're going to want to hang around for this one, though, because I want to try and point out things that nobody's really talking about. We know from the trial, Amber Heard had this pattern of not allowing Johnny to put room between him and her. He would try to seek space, put distance between them, and she would follow him like a puppy and try to continue the fight. There was this incessant need to continue the fight. And there was real resentment against Johnny for him wanting to leave the fight. And you can frame this a number of ways and be accurate, okay? So I certainly don't think that my opinion is the superior opinion or anything like that. There's just a more nuanced way of viewing things. People tend to steer clear of nuance, especially on the internet. So I want to get into it. You can hear it during the cross-examination. When she's in the recordings, when she's lambasting him for leaving the argument, right? She says things like, how are we supposed to work through this if you're always leaving the argument? We need to work through this. We need to work through the argument, right? We've got to get through the fight, right? That's what you do when you love somebody. You fight through it, right? That's kind of a red flag. Not gonna lie. There's this need, or there's this belief that people who love each other fight, and that they fight for each other, and that they will fight through it, right? Fight through the disagreement. And yeah, there's times to do that. But at the heart of every argument, whether you're toxic or not toxic, an argument is simply a disagreement. And you don't have to agree, you just have to reach an understanding. And it doesn't require big feelings and big anger and big fights to come to an understanding. And you cannot come to an understanding if you cannot learn something new. And you cannot learn anything new if you have a low IQ. And if you have a low IQ, learning's not your thing. And the problem is, anger drops your IQ by up to 40 points. And what that means, the average engineer has an IQ of between 120 to 130. The average is 100. The military, the US military, will not accept anybody with an IQ lower than 88. So if your IQ is 88 or below, you cannot push them up for the military, right? So it doesn't take big rocket science to figure out if you have an IQ of 120 minus 40 gives you 80. When you're angry, an angry engineer would be dumber than a mop pusher in the military. Yes, right? So that's why these things perpetuate. But why is she so insistent on continuing to fight, to continue the attachment, and to prevent him from leaving, right? Because most of us, when we get angry, generally we all understand, okay, you know what? We need to cool down. Let's get some distance. We'll both calm down, breathe into a paper bag, whatever, and then we'll revisit this when we're calm, right? Why doesn't she want to do that? And it has to do with the borderline personality disorder. So there's two big contributors to this, as far as I can tell. With borderlines feel big feelings, disproportionately big feelings, to an insane degree. It's not a life I would want to live. It is entirely possible, although it may or may not be common, but entirely possible that a borderline person can feel funeral level grief over something as simple as being ghosted on a text message, or even not having your text messages replied to fast enough, because that is a form of abandonment. Borderlines have a very, very deep fear of abandonment. It contributes heavily to their anxiety. And when you have somebody with feeling big feelings all the time, start to feel anxiety, that's a problem, right? The other thing is, borderlines tend to rely on other people to help regulate their emotions, right? Because when you get emotional, your IQ drops, and then you are no longer of sufficient mental capacity to navigate your way out of the big feelings. So oftentimes, borderlines need what's called a favorite person, or their FP, to help them find their way out of the big feelings, okay? When you're having what's not borderline, the term borderline means you're in a psychological state that is right on the borderline of a simultaneous psychosis and neurosis. Like, you're right on the borderline of both, okay? Psychosis speaks for itself. Delusions, hallucinations, misunderstanding. And neurosis is that anxiety, that angst, worry, all of that, right? Put those two together, not a fun experience, right? And so when somebody's having a borderline episode, especially a severe one, the structures of reality, objective reality, break down completely. Not partially, not just a little bit. You don't get a little bit out of touch. They break down completely. And you can feel very, very big, painful feelings, big feelings of anger, big feelings of rejection, all the things, yes? And when you combine that, if you have a borderline who is having a borderline episode, trying to navigate their way out of it, and if the cause of it is their favorite person, then you have a very, very combustible situation. So you're the person that is my favorite person who helps me out of these situations, but if that favorite person is also the source of it, that becomes a problem, right? And if that person tries to put distance between them and the borderline person, well, then that's abandonment. And that further contributes to the situation. And you can hear that in the recordings with Amber Heard when they're sitting in the car outside of a condo or penthouse or house or home, wherever. And Johnny's just trying to go in and visit his child for a few hours, and she won't let him. She ends up texting him incessantly, won't stop texting. And he says, would you just please leave me alone for a few hours so we can calm down and take a break? And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, why won't you? And she's always saying things like, you never fight for us. Like, we've got to get through the fight, right? Well, that's because she's trying to navigate her way out of this borderline episode. She needs his help to do it, but neither of them really know or fully understand this dynamic, right? So that's how you end up with a situation like that, where she's a stage 5 clinger, we'll say. That's how she's acting, like a stage 5 clinger. But you get those situations when you have somebody who's borderline, having a borderline episode that is caused by their favorite person, who is normally the one who helps them navigate those big feelings, except now that person is the source of the big feelings. You can't convince them. The favorite person's now not helping them get out of the feelings. The favorite person needs some space. That's abandonment. That just adds more fuel to the fire. And because the very structures of reality break down, and because you're feeling big feelings, all of this understandably feels deliberate to the borderline. Especially if they don't know and understand that they're borderline, and they don't understand why these things are happening, right? Somebody who is self-aware can sometimes catch themselves and they realize this, right? It is manageable when you understand it. But that is pretty much why this happens. And like I said, there's multiple ways to lens it. This is certainly not the only explanation. There are other very accurate explanations. There can be other pathologies like psychopathy that also accurately explain what's happening, and it may very well be possible that psychopathy plays a role here. But you know, she was clinically diagnosed as borderline, so that's what I'm talking about. Anyways, I'm here at the office, parking my car. So do please like, comment, or share. I want to hear what you guys think, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Parking my car, parking my car, parking my car. Okay, time for work.